Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. My name is Andrew Velez. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Joel Dels. This is episode number 26 of the Fantasy Reaction Show, and we are here after Sunday Night Football, where you see by the title, we just watched the Packers versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And who would have thought, Joel, that we'd be here talking about Jordan Love outperforming Patrick Mahomes on primetime television. Now, before we get too ahead of ourselves, Mr. Dels, how are you doing tonight?
Doing fantastic. First of all, congratulations to you. Moved on in our playoffs, going up against Giovanni in the next round. It made it interesting at the end. I took a little peek because I was like, Debo starts going crazy. Tyreek and Tua, of course, combined for like 60, 70 points. But you still had a comfortable lead. And the Kyren Williams touchdown to kind of close off the 4 p.m. window, I'm just like, that's got to hurt. That's got to hurt. I felt bad for Joey because he's been going at it with G for basically 2 weeks now over that deal. But doing good, man. Congratulations. Hopefully I see you in the championship.
I appreciate that. And listen, I would love to see you in the championship just for storyline purposes, just because how poetic would it be if we're here doing the Fantasy Reaction Show? Maybe these guys in our league should have tuned in a little bit more to get on our level so that they could be competing for championships themselves. But definitely ironic, I would use the word, where this guy Joey is putting up a masterpiece against me. I'm going against Tua. I'm going against Tyreek. I'm going against Debo. It was just every good player that you could imagine this week was on his team. And it just didn't matter. And Kyren Williams, who I acquired him late in the season, he was throwing a fit over him getting traded to my squad. He dropped 40 on him last week. This week, a calm 20. And the last score of the night was, of course, of the 4 p.m. slate was a Kyren Williams touchdown. That was pretty funny. But you know why we're here, Mr. Dowes. We're here to talk about not just the studs and duds of week 13, but we're here to discuss this Sunday Night Football game that we just watched. Now, you guys know how it goes. When there's a game that fits someone's narrative on the show, we got to get him here as a special guest. You can only guess who our special guest is going to be. Mr. Joel Moran, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. Beautiful intro, by the way. And I want to congratulate Mr. Dels. He had a very great slate of NFL pick'ems this week.
He did.
Listen, he listened to his gut and not picking the Jets. I wish I would have did the same. I went through Tim Boyer. I went through Trevor Siemian. They both couldn't get it done. I was just calling for Zach. And the way Joe Flacco played against the Rams, I'm saying we should have just had Joe Flacco. He would have led us to the playoffs, and then Rodgers finishes off the job. But Jordan Love, the masterclass he put forth, fellas, I have something for you two on tomorrow's show. I'm not going to reveal what it is just yet, but I have something waiting for you, Drew, for you, Dels, and for Mr. Riverswell. I have
Is it
something
going to be a black
waiting.
book?
No, it's a montage. It's a montage video.
Montage? Okay.
It's not going to be neither. I don't want to say too much because I want it to be a surprise, but just know You guys better be ready. But listen, man, the Packers are 6-6. I thought they were going to make the playoffs. Even with this loss, even if they were 5-7, I thought they would run the table. This only supports further Matt LaFleur's greatness in December. When you have to win these games, he's able to win them. That's the model of a great coach. And it's not just Jordan Love. It's this entire Packers team. Matt LaFleur has proven himself as a great coach. The offensive line is pass protecting well. I think somebody who doesn't get talked about is Zach Tom, who is a right tackle for them, who is a second-year player and was in the draft class with Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, and Trevor Penning. He's better than all those guys. Christian Watson's playing well. Dobbs is playing well. Dontavian Wicks is playing well. Jaden Reed, Malik Heath, all these young players are finally fitting nicely with each other. They're not committing dumb penalties. And in the secondary, when they traded Rasul Douglas, that was kind of a waving the white flag moment for a lot of people when that move happened. But Carrington Valentine, who's a 7th-round rookie, has taken his spot. And the reason why they traded Rasul was to give him more playing time. And Carrington Valentine, since that time, has been one of the best corners, allowing one of the lowest passer ratings. And then you have Keshawn Nixon making plays. I mean, this team, Jair didn't play. Eric Stokes didn't play. two guys that were supposed to be the future at the defensive back position for this team. It's been the other guys stepping up, and that defensive line, the only defensive line to get after Mahomes the way they got after Mahomes, sacking him 3 times in the red zone. Rashawn Gary's a superstar, but they got a lot of great players on that defensive line. All those things are going well for the Packers. But you want to know what, guys? It only matters if the quarterback is good, because all those things you can say go well for the Jets. Last year, we had a great roster. This year, we got a great roster. We got an elite defense, but nothing is working out because, one, we don't have the coach, the offensive head coach, and we don't have the quarterback. You got to have the quarterback. And Jordan Love, the way this young man has handled himself after 3 years of slander, being called a waste of a pick, being called a bust, before he ever got a chance to prove himself. He had a little bit of a rough stretch, but now, I don't know if you guys were aware, but he is the only Packers quarterback in NFL history in their first year starting who has thrown who has had 3 or more games of 3+ passing touchdowns. He has 4 this year. He's already having a better first-year start than Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. So I'm saying in the next 4 or 5 years, the Packers are going to hold up that Lombardi.
Oh, wow. So we're going from Jordan Love being complete bust to struggling his first month of the season, right off 3 or 4 good games. Now it's championship in the next 5 years. So I'll make sure I'm getting that timeline correct.
Jordan Love, what he's showing right now in this stretch of games is not just a small stretch. He's playing at a top 15 quarterback level. Right, this past week, I made my quarterback list. I think he ranked in the 16th spot. He's going to move up some for me. Next year, when the Packers have 11 draft picks.
Who's he kicking out?
It might be Geno. I still got to look.
I mean, he just had a go week, too.
Right now, he's kicking out Kyler. He's kicking out Kyler for that spot. When I look at Jordan Love, I look at the Packers. They have 11 draft picks in this upcoming draft. They're going to be able to trade for a superstar wide receiver, most likely. You get one more outstanding weapon on this Packers team, Jordan Love can break out even further this year. I just want you guys to know he's on pace for 30 passing touchdowns this year. 30 passing touchdowns and over 3,500 yards. He might get to 4,000 yards. In his first year as a starter, if he hits 4,000 yards and 30 passing touchdowns, that's a franchise quarterback.
If he's able to hit those marks, I'll put my hands up and you got it. Jordan Love, this was by far his most impressive game because, these last 3-4 weeks, the competition wasn't really there, especially defensively, right? You're going up against the Chargers, going up against the Lions, some bad defenses that we've seen being able to get taken advantage of. And going into this Chiefs game, we talked about it on the Pick'em on Patreon. We talked about it. Jordan Love was my sit of the week at the quarterback position. The way this Chiefs defense has been playing this season, I really didn't think that there was a chance he'd be able to perform at this type of level. I didn't think Jordan Love would be able to go out there for 3 touchdowns, 260 yards, a passer rating over 116. He went out there and outperformed Patrick Mahomes, some people's MVP. The number 1 quarterback in the NFL that nobody can touch. And Patrick Mahomes, that's a conversation. That's a conversation for a different day. But what Jordan Love did, and you got to give credit to Matt LaFleur, you got to give credit to these young guys. And unfortunately, Christian Watson did go down with the hammy at the end of the game. Was there, post-game dapping people up, seemed like hopefully it's not a long-term injury, but having Watson, Romeo Doubs, your guy, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, who's hurt, but once he gets back, we know he's a very athletic tight end who can make plays too. I think early on, me included, were probably too harsh on this young group, right? You got to give some times to develop, to mesh with the offense, get that chemistry with the quarterback and just the offensive system as a whole, because we're seeing the second half of the year, the offense really pop off. And what Jordan Love's doing, top 10 quarterback, I'm not ready to go there yet, but he's not a bust. There's no way. I think I don't even want to say issue because that's too far. But the only thing that's unfortunate is that he's going to be due up for a contract in a year, right? So the Packers, who have 11 draft pick, which is fantastic, if he has that 4,000 yards, that 30 touchdown type season, how quick will the Packers be to give them that maybe Carson Wentz type deal where they signed Carson Wentz a year early, thought maybe they'd get a discount. We saw how that ended up going. But what Jordan Love did tonight, what he's been doing over this past month, nothing but praise. He's playing, I agree, probably at a top 15 level over this past month.
Now, I wanted to say this before I start to speak because I understand that if you watched our last episode, our last football episode, you know that Joel and I got into a little bit of a I don't want to say argument, a little bit of a spat. That's the perfect word that I would use. Because what I've tried to do with Jordan Love is take it week by week and give my analysis on Jordan that way. Try to be fair to the kid. Be honest. There were moments in this season where he did not look good, but I was consistent. I gave him the benefit of the doubt in these 4 games where the statistics didn't back him up the most. If you were watching the film, you'd understood he wasn't playing that bad. In the second half of games, this is where we started to see Jordan Love become a lot more comfortable. I laid that out for the guys on the show as well. But again, like I said, I've tried to stay as unbiased as possible. Last week versus the Lions, I felt like he'd have a great performance. This week versus Kansas City, this was the one I wasn't sure. We're talking about Kansas City, one of the best defenses in the National Football League. Here I am, giving him his flowers, going out there and balling the hell out against one of the league's best defenses, going up against the opposing guy who, of course, we're talking about as the best quarterback in the league. That's one of the more unquestioned things. My dog's about to start barking. Get ready. She's about to get rude. But to go out there, of course, against one of the best teams in the National Football League, against one of the better, more hard-nosed defenses, you have a lot of expectation on you now that you've started to play well to go out there and execute, especially with these group of guys and how young they are. But we also have to give some credit to the wide receivers. Joel, yourself, you went and called out Christian Watson for valid reason. He'd been struggling these last couple of weeks. We finally see Christian Watson kind of break out. Unfortunate it goes down the way that he does. It looked kind of bad where he just kind of goes to the ground and holds his hamstring. You mentioned it was around after the game, giving high fives and saying good game and stuff. But again, very unfortunate because you started to see the two of them, which was the expectation coming into the season, that this would be the reliable duo. But you've mentioned it. He has a connection with Romeo Doubs where he makes a nice play on fourth down, where he kind of just throws it up and he falls back, makes a nice grab. Dontavian Wicks has come along these last couple of weeks. Jaden Reed and the speed that he has for the offense. Got to give credit to A.J. Dillon, too, who went and did a great job against one of the better rush defenses in the league as well. This is a young group of guys. This is the youngest group of guys in the National Football League. And yes, of course, you have to start with Jordan Love because he's the quarterback and he's the one who's ultimately running the show. But again, it's a group effort right now from the Green Bay Packers. And you can't beat a team like the Kansas City Chiefs without a concerted team effort. The defense played their ass off. And listen, the title may be funny. If you watch the game, you understand that the referees tried to have their hand in this one with the late hit on Patrick Mahomes, which I didn't think was a late hit. I don't think that I'm in the minority in that either. I thought that was a very clean hit on Patrick. And then trying to make up for it, they don't call an obvious defensive pass interference that could have put the Chiefs right at the 2-3 yard line. But again, if you do watch, you just understand that Jordan Love seized opportunity and seized moments. That's the strong takeaway from this. And you go and you beat a Kansas City team that you are obviously an underdog. Got to give credit where credit is due. Jordan Love did an excellent job tonight of executing, and you got to give him his respect.
I think the thing with Jordan Love really is that he makes some throws that there's not a lot of quarterbacks in the league that can make. There are a handful of guys that can make certain throws that he can make. And very early in the season, there were flashes of the arm strength and the arm talent that he showcased. But now that is being combined with the accuracy, the precision, the in rhythm throws. And when all that comes together, you're talking about a quarterback who can play in structure and then make plays out of structure. The arm talent is very real. And there's a reason why the Packers traded up to get him in the 2020 NFL draft, because they fell in love with the talent, just like a lot of teams fall in love with the talent. But I think this is a perfect case study of how you develop a quarterback. You have him sit under a veteran for a year or two, and then he gets to play. Because a lot of times these guys that are very talented play right away, and they get thrust into awful situations like a Bryce Young. And now,
I'm surprised you didn't say Zach Wilson.
Well, Zach Wilson also was thrust into a bad situation. I only wish Zach Wilson got time to develop. But then these quarterbacks, they are kind of thrown to the wolves and they don't play well. And then they never have a chance to really get their career off the ground. I think a perfect example of that's a Jet really is Sam Darnold. I think if Sam Darnold went to a great situation, we wouldn't look at him as the bust that he is. I think he'd be fine. But because he had to start right away, he was with Adam Gase. He was terrible. So Jordan Love having a chance that he had to sit behind Aaron Rodgers has helped him. It's done wonders. But there really is just a handful of guys that are as talented as him at the quarterback position, and that's what's intriguing.
What I was most impressed by, and does my mic sound better now? I turned it down a bit. Sound better? Okay, cool.
Yes.
He looked very comfortable tonight. You know, this is a Monday night or Sunday night football, Kansas City Chiefs on your home turf. You just have really a huge win against the Detroit Lions, another game on national television where your playoff chances are basically on the line going up against a divisional opponent. The ability to follow that up, and today, whether he was in the pocket, outside the pocket, he never really looked rattled. I felt like he was always composed. He was constantly looking down the field to try to make a play rather than first read's not there, let me take off, like we see a lot of young quarterbacks do, just wanting to bail the pocket because they don't feel comfortable just sitting there having to go through progression. But Jordan Love was able to do that tonight. And I know we're kind of, I don't want to overstate the facts because we're not talking about the Chiefs so much. The Chiefs still deserve their credit because defensively, every year it's been the offense that's carried the load for the Chiefs. And this year it's kind of flipped that, right? And we're seeing the defense take the load. And when the Kansas City Chiefs offensively are not able to put up these scores, right, have long sustained drives, and now we're seeing the defense, more pressure put on them. I'm curious if this top 5 level defense we've seen throughout the season is able to keep up, because we've been talking all season long about just give it time. It's Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. They will figure it out. But I mean, they're 2-3 in their last 5 games. They have some bad losses in there, like that Denver game where they just got completely shut down offensively. There's times even in this game where it feels like it's a struggle to move the ball. And I understand if that MVS call goes their way, you're still on the 5-6 yard line. You still have to get a 2-point conversion. That's just to get into overtime. And the way Jordan Love and the Packers are moving that ball, I don't know if I could say with certainty the Chiefs just would have won the coin toss, got the ball, went down and scored a touchdown. Kansas City Chiefs have their own problems, but today's for Jordan Love. And I just wanted to kind of point out how impressed I was in this big of a setting that he was so composed, being able to go through his reads and have probably the best game of his career.
Now, do we want to actually give a quick conversation to the Kansas City Chiefs, who last week versus the Las Vegas Raiders in the second half, they looked like they figured it out. They were clicking. We saw Rashee Rice go for over 100. Of course, Pacheco wasn't that efficient, but of course he had his mark on the game. Just in general, it looked as if the Kansas City Chiefs were trending in that right direction. And then here we go, going up against the Green Bay Packers, albeit on the road, Lambeau Field, of course, a great environment. Now you go and last 2 drives of the game. Well, let's focus on the one right before, where Patrick Mahomes throws that interception, one that kind of just got away from him. We look at this offense as a whole from the Kansas City Chiefs. It lacks juice. It lacks someone that can consistently win down the field. And when Travis Kelce isn't at 100%, which even still, I feel as if we're not looking at Travis Kelce be the guy that we've known him to be in terms of physique, in terms of energy. He just doesn't seem like he's doing it as consistently as we've seen in the past. And I've been vocal. I like a Rashee Rice. I think that he has a lot of talent and definitely should be utilized a little bit more in this offense as it progresses. He is a rookie. You got to earn your strides. We saw that a little bit last week where he kind of earned his stripes. But again, this offense does not have a big play wide receiver that they can trust on a consistent basis to win. And I think in the grand scheme of things, we're going to be looking at that as the main reason why, in my opinion, the Kansas City Chiefs are not making it out of the AFC. This defense is great. It is a high-level defense, and with Patrick Mahomes on the other side, you always will take that chance, and I understand that. I'm wearing a Broncos hat. I love my Broncos, and I will consistently hate on the Chiefs, but putting that aside for a second, you know that Patrick Mahomes, if he has one opportunity to win a ball game, you like your chances more often than not. But in a couple situations here, so in the regular season, we've kind of seen where the defense is saving face a little bit. Hey, take it easy there, champion. Get out of here. And then you had to know. So with that, Penelope, take it easy. All right, one of you guys want to talk while I calm this girl down?
Talk to me about the Chiefs, Joel.
The wide receiver problem is not going to be fixed. It's as simple as that. They don't have the receivers to win one-on-one. And if this was a problem that was Patrick Mahomes related, which means he's the one turning the ball over, he's the one making reads that aren't the best, then I think it gets fixed. But the fact that he now has to rely on other people to do their job right, I think Sky Moore's terrible. I think MVS is terrible. I think last year he was good in his role, and this year, I don't know if it was a Super Bowl hangover, kind of got a little bit too ahead of himself and full of himself, but he's been terrible this year. Their most reliable receivers are Rashee Rice, who's a rookie, and Justin Watson, who Justin Watson's okay as like a role player, and Travis Kelce's just getting doubled now. The receivers are not going to get much better. I think that in these games, though, Andy Reid is experimenting a little bit just to give these receivers more reps in games to fail. The Sky Moore interception was a bit up in the air for me. I don't know if that was miscommunication between him and Mahomes, if he ran the wrong route. Keshawn Nixon did a great job tracking it. But the thing about the AFC is that the Ravens just lost Mark Andrews. So the Ravens are relying on Odell Beckham Jr., who is a shell of himself, a rookie in Zay Flowers, who already had a game this season where he had drops, cost them a game, Nelson Aguilar, and Rashad Bateman. So even a team like Baltimore, they don't have the receiver position all the way figured out. The Chiefs don't have the receiver position all the way figured out. The Dolphins,
one more team. Yes,
the Dolphins have their offense figured out, but Tua is their quarterback. And that's the biggest reason why I just don't trust them come playoff time.
Isn't that funny? Someone can laugh about Tua, but then wants us to stand 10 toes with a Jordan Love. How funny.
You don't got to stand 10 toes with Jordan Love.
No, you want us to, is what I'm saying. You
Who
want
play
us
better
to
versus the Chiefs, Jordan Love or Tua?
Then you'll laugh. Oof. Close. Probably lean Jordan. You got the W. You ultimately got to go with the W.
If you want to pick the Dolphins to make it out the NFC, the AFC, I totally understand. But right now, the Chiefs and the Ravens, who I look at as the best teams in the AFC, they both have receiver problems. Which one I lean on and figure it out more, it is the Chiefs. But right now, it's clear. I mean, the Achilles heel of this team is the wide receivers. That's why they lost versus the Lions. That's why they lost versus the Eagles. That's why they almost lost against the Dolphins. That's why they lost tonight. It's been a reoccurring issue. And listen, Mahomes, Dells, if you don't want to have him in the MVP conversation, I understand. He doesn't have the numbers.
Jordan Love?
He doesn't have the numbers, but he is still the most valuable player in the league. And I think right now Dak is the MVP. If I'm voting right now, Dak is the MVP.
What about Mr. Tagovailoa? Why isn't he the MVP? Look what he does against exactly the same competition. He lights them up just like Dak does.
Against the Commanders?
Seahawks, Commanders, look at what just happened. The Dolphins kind of had to relax a little bit come second half.
Mike White was in the game.
What they were doing in the first half? It was a light show.
Yeah,
Tyreek went for over 150, two of those for over 200 yards. He finished with almost a near perfect passer rating. It was light work.
He has Tyreek Hill.
And he has CeeDee Lamb.
Tyreek Hill is more of a game changer than CeeDee Lamb.
He is, but CeeDee Lamb has entered that top 7-8 conversation.
He has, but Dak is spreading the sugar. Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks is starting to play well.
Tua. Respect. It's not his fault that Tyreek's always open. He's going to hit the open guy. We know Tua is going to do that on a consistent basis.
Dak got better numbers than Tua though this year.
The interceptions definitely is that's what it is. Tua definitely has been a little overzealous at times, and we've seen Dak definitely take care of the ball. But better numbers, it's marginal.
And
again,
right now as we stand today, sorry, Drew, to end your defense, before the Jaguars play tomorrow, Miami has the number 1 seed in the AFC. If it comes down to that too, because listen, Dallas, these next month, really both these teams, we talked about it on Patreon, that they're both going to have tests, both of them, facing good opponents finally for the last month of the season. Both have a chance to get that number 1 seed in their respective conferences if they're able to get home field advantage, and they could stay Dallas in the Dome, Miami down there in South Beach. They don't got to go to some crappy Baltimore game, or Dallas doesn't go to some crappy Philly game playing outside with that offensive line and run game. It's up in the air who can win each conference.
Oh, God help me. Just give the MVP to Tyreek Hill. I can't bear a Tua MVP.
Yeah, I bet you couldn't bear Tua MVP because I would be excruciating to be around, especially with all the disrespect you've put on his name. But be honest with you, if it means that Tua doesn't win the MVP, it is what it is. God willing, my Broncos make it to the playoffs. We make a beautiful run. But if that isn't the case, and Tua goes and he gets robbed of the MVP, but just so happens to lift the Lombardi, I'll take that as a consolation prize for Tua, of course.
I think that Brett Veach is gonna aggressively attack the wide receiver position this offseason.
Has to.
If the Chiefs don't make it out the AFC, well, that's going to motivate them even more. And I think that next year they're going to make it out the AFC because next year they're going to bring in an influx of wide receiver talent. To this point, he's kind of ignored the position. In the first round, they took an edge rusher because he's from Kansas City and the draft was in Kansas City, but they didn't need an edge rusher. They drafted George Karlaftis last year in the first round, but he's already built up the offensive line. He's built up the defense. He has two pillars of an amazing team already that he's built. So next up is just the wide receiver, which if you've been paying attention to the drafts these past couple of years, that's the position that we have the most talent in. So I think they will attack the draft aggressively and get Mahomes wide receivers.
Especially when you've seen that they've tried, I guess you could say tried. Sky Moore was an attempt. McCole Hardman was an attempt. Rashee Rice is seeming as if that's a success as of right now with the production that he's shown early on in his rookie season. But they've had a couple swings and misses, but at least they've attempted to go and get him wide receivers, albeit in the draft and not being as aggressive as they should have been either in the trade conversations or in free agency. I think not going after DeAndre Hopkins with more aggression was a mistake. D-Hop would have been unbelievable, where you see him having some level of success over there in Tennessee, had himself a great game today against Indianapolis, but imagine him with a Patrick Mahomes and, of course, a Travis Kelce, who Travis Kelce may not have to or may not be under the microscope as much going through whatever injury that he's nursing right now. If DeAndre Hopkins is on the field as well, it becomes virtually impossible to guard one or the other. And then Mahomes would also have another reliable option on top of that. But I feel as if that end of the day goes down to Veach and the lack of aggression and the lack of consistency that we've seen in the offseason to try and help Mahomes in that spot outside of the draft. Now, Mr. Moran, is there anything that you would like to say before you go and get out of here, whether it be bias, whether it be agenda-based, or whether it just be positive vibes?
Bring pens tomorrow. Drew, you might want to bring a Sharpie because
I need the Sharpie. Sharpie's a must. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You guys bring pens. Even though I have pens, I want you guys to bring your own pens. So any color you want, just bring pens tomorrow.
Okay. Just cause? And that's it?
That's it. You'll find out tomorrow.
Okay. Well, this is bizarre. Now, do you know what this could be at all?
Contract or something. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of.
God, if it's a contract, I'm going to throw up. All right, Mr. Moran. Well, we appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right, brother. I love you.
Good night.
All right. Take it easy. All right, Mr. Dells. Now we're here going to talk about some fantasy football and the studs and duds of Week 13. But do you have any closing remarks before we move on to the studs and duds?
We're gonna have a very interesting pick a side episode tomorrow. There's some nasty agendas to be pushed. You have Joel going on a tweeting spree over Jalen Hurts and getting outperformed by Brock Purdy and all of these quarterbacks. But then tonight, his boy Patrick Mahomes gets outperformed by Jordan Love. So I'm interested to see how he's going to push his agendas tomorrow, because he's going to have to be very careful which line he's teetering, because we're going to have some ammo to go against. Oh, I guess Dak's that guy now, but his boy Patrick Mahomes, who he wanted to give the MVP trophy to not too long ago.
Yeah, he really faded. He was just like, you know what? It's got to be Mahomes. It's got to be Lamar Jackson. But now he sees creeping in slowly. He's like, you know what? I don't have to go Jalen. I don't have to go Tua. Here comes this guy, Mr. Dak Prescott over there in Dallas. I respect it. Sometimes you got to get nasty, and when you're Joel, more often than not, you get nasty. But hey, he's doing a great job. But our guys, Mr. Hurts over there, Tua Tagovailoa, they're doing a good enough job to represent us.
Conversation,
right? Another guy who's going to be in that conversation, unfortunately, is a guy who beat us today, Mr. CJ Stroud. Had himself a better first half than he did his second half. And I only say that because I've seen some comments saying that I've been on my high horse a little bit and that I was humbled today. I only say that with the idea of, CJ looked a lot better in that first half than he did in that second half.
He did
That
get banged
Broncos
up a little
defense,
bit in the second half too.
that's also true. Did leave the field. We saw Davis Mills come in late into that game, but CJ was quickly out of that tent and back onto the field. But again, that defense definitely did its part today in that second half specifically, where you're getting to CJ Stroud, we were making him uncomfortable. We kind of missed our opportunity, forcing that fumble and then not picking it up. It would have put us right in the red zone. Instead, it puts us on the opposite side of the field once they kick that punt. And with the last chance to win the game, where Russ has already leading the league in game-winning drives, we just come up a bit short. And you know what? I'll say this, and I'm going to say this again on tomorrow's show. I am 100% okay with what happened. And I say that with the idea I'm upset that we lost. I'm very sad that we lost, because we would have been in such a better position to make the playoffs. That being said, this was the first time I feel like in a Broncos uniform, where we've been playing winning football, is that I've seen Russ trust his arm and let it go. The one that kind of sticks out is the one that he QB sneaked on fourth down and Judy was open. That's fine. That's a miss. But what I can respect is that he was actually taking shots downfield. That interception to Courtland Sutton, I can live with. People are trying to say that Judy was open. No, he kind of draws the safety, and so Russ sees Sutton over the top. Stingley makes an amazing play on the ball. That interception to end the game, did it suck to see? Absolutely. Did I know that people were going to push narratives saying that Russ is going to Russ? Of course. But what happens? He shrugs off a sack that he had been getting pressured all game long. He shrugs off a sack, stays strong in the pocket. I know what he was seeing. He saw the tight end open, but didn't account for the safety. The safety just drops and makes a good play on the ball. I loved seeing Russ look like Russ in Seattle, where he was trusting his arm to make plays and win the ball game. We came up short, but that's going to happen. It is what it is. We were on a 5-game heater. I'm pretty upset we lost, but I had some strong takeaways from this, that Russ looked confident. And I haven't seen Russ trust his arm the way that he did today, although it did lead to some turnovers, in such a long time.
And that throw to Courtland Sutton, that touchdown when he's on the right side of the field,
and
all the way to the
about,
left corner.
Court, great job. That's a dime.
It was a dot. It was a beautiful ball. It was a beautiful catch on both ends. I don't know which one was better. It was beautiful, but I agree with you. I mean, that Texans team is for real. Like, they just made my power rankings 10th best team in the league. So it's a tough loss because it's obviously going to have pretty huge playoff implications. I think they said if a win's like 66%, a loss was in like the mid 20s or something. So yeah, you're going to have an uphill battle from here, but that Texans team is for real. Will Anderson had himself probably the best game of his career. I think he had 8 pressures, had a couple sacks. He killed really, he was wrecking havoc the entire game. But I agree with you. We've seen Russ throughout this season more or less game manage. He's been great as a scrambler too. I think that's probably been his most underrated asset. We saw it a couple times on that last drive too, on 3rd and 4th downs, being able to pick up first downs, keep the drive going. But this was a game where he let it sling, and you saw the big playability he still has. Courtland Sutton's having that reemergence. So yeah, you have to be excited for the Broncos. It is a bit of an uphill battle now. And, you look at a couple of those games, the Lions bouncing back. Now you still have the Chargers, who are definitely beatable, and the Raiders. But if you take care of business, you're going to have to win out, most likely. One more loss, especially because you have a ton of AFC opponents upcoming too, is probably going to be the end of it. But I don't think it's over. It's gloom, but it's not over.
It definitely was tough to see Russ throw that INT, because I knew Twitter was going to get nasty with me.
Prayers to Tank Dell.
Oh, no, absolutely. And that's another thing that we'll talk about real quick. How they put him in that position on a 2 wide receiver set when you're just going to run a halfback dive. That was so dumb. I don't want to say they put him in that position, but they did put him in that position, unfortunately. It's like, he's not the bigger frame wide receiver to be putting in a situation to block up front, especially on the goal line. That was definitely an interesting decision by the offense. But hey, of course, we send our thoughts and our prayers to Tank Dell, one of the premier young receivers in the league. He'll be back, and he'll be better than ever. Now, let's move on to the studs and duds section of the show. But before we do that, if you guys are sticking around, one, we appreciate it. But if you guys could drop a like on this video, that'd be much appreciated as well. If you aren't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe. Turn on your notification bell so you know when we go live, like nights like tonight. We go live on Sundays and Thursdays. But without further ado, let's move on to the stud section of Week 13, quarterbacks. Quarterback 1, Geno Smith. We spoke about it on Thursday night. Geno Smith was spectacular. He finishes as your quarterback 1. Quarterback 2, start of the week candidate, Brock Purdy goes ahead and lights up Philadelphia. We're going to get into crazier conversations tomorrow. You already know. I am interested to see where Riv goes in the conversation where his Eagles lost, but his boy Brock Purdy came up as big as you possibly can. He goes and he finishes quarterback 2 with just under 30 fantasy points. He was phenomenal in his own right. 314, 4 touchdowns. A lot of them was yards after the carry with Deebo Samuel. Yeah. I'm not gonna say it wasn't, but end of the day, you got to go out there and execute. And in fantasy football, that doesn't matter to us. All that matters is that this player got into the end zone. Quarterback 3, Dak Prescott. I mean, 2 of the top 3 from that Seattle Cowboys game. It speaks to how offensive that game was. Number 4, Jalen Hurts. I mean, that's a floor at this point in time. He didn't even have himself that
Jalen Hurts game. QB4 is hilarious.
He didn't even have that good of a game. He leaves this game with a concussion. That kind of concerned, I'm sure, every single type of fan, but he still goes and comes back into this game, finishes as quarterback 4 on the week. We're going to get into more of that discussion on tomorrow's show, but for fantasy football, Jalen Hurts is going to be Jalen Hurts. Number 5, Jordan Love. Now, he's been interesting. The last few weeks, he's been playing some pretty high-level football. It goes into that conversation that we had early on of the Blake Bortles Award. I feel as if we're kind of trending towards that conversation of that's more disrespectful than what we anticipated it to be. He's been playing some very high-level football as of late, and you need to give him that respect, especially going up against Kansas City when you and I both believed he was a potential sit of the week, and he goes and is a top 5 quarterback. He told us to shut up and just watch him ball out, and I respect that. Quarterback Absolutely. 6, Matthew Stafford had himself a great game, 279, 3 touchdowns, 23 fantasy points. My sit of the week, who I didn't even feel that good to sit, Mr. Sam Howell. His floor is top 10. I said it the last 5 weeks. He's been at worst a top 10 quarterback week to week. He finishes as your quarterback 7 against Miami, who executed a pretty solid game plan. This was a lot of garbage time. He really is the epitome of the Blake Bortles Award, where yes. I don't think Sam Howell's bad. I don't think he's bad, but for fantasy football, he's a lot better than how he performs in real life. And that's not a knock, because in fantasy football, we cherish you, Sam. We love everything that you do for us on that football field. Number 8, Tua Tagovailoa. He could have had a way better game than what he had. The game just got out of hand. To be a top 8 quarterback and essentially you only played 2.5 quarters, I mean, he really just dominated in that first half. Goes for 280, 2 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns being for over, I think one was over 60, the other was over 70 yards. Tyreek Hill was just at a different level. Number 9, Russell Wilson. You know that he's going to have himself a ball game, but it sucks that he came up a bit short. Finished as a top 10 quarterback while still throwing 3 INTs. He was really slinging the ball, was able to rush in a touchdown as well. Would have loved we came with W, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. And number 10, Gardner Minshew, like we all anticipated. But hey, Gardner Minshew, when you're going up against that Tennessee defense, you couldn't have been too shocked that he had himself a solid performance. But 19 fantasy points. He finishes with 312, 2 touchdowns. Solid performance from the kid and showed some heart where he goes into overtime, throws a nice dot to Alec Pierce, and then the game-winning touchdown to Michael Pittman, who we're definitely going to talk about later in the wide receiver section.
Moving on to QB duds. We just talked about him, but Patrick Mahomes, 21 of 33, 210 yards, a touchdown, an interception. I'm looking at his last month, right? To start off the year, right through 7 weeks, he was on fire. Week 7, he was QB1, but then QB 30 against Denver, QB 12 against Miami, QB 15 against Philly, QB 8 against Vegas, which is fine, but then QB 14 against Green Bay. This Patrick Mahomes that was, fantasy god tearing up the league, he still got in him, we know, but the way this offense is struggling right now, it's hard for him to consistently be that top 5 quarterback. We haven't seen it since the first month of the season. I'm
Talk me. I'm
not
glad it's
getting
not
as
just me.
crazy as you.
No,
I'm not getting as
start getting
crazy as
crazy,
you.
Joel. Joel, there's nothing wrong
I'm
with
not.
getting crazy when he sets such a standard that when you don't live up to the standard, sorry, you have to get a little critiqued. Nothing wrong with that. All's
I'm
fair.
just talking about for fantasy. Those top
All
5
right.
finishes might not be there for the next month or so of the
But you want
season.
to know what's
Get this
also
man
pretty
some help.
ironic? Mahomes was drafted number 1 overall in a lot of leagues.
He
How many
was.
quarterbacks right now would you rather over Patrick Mahomes in fantasy football this season? Jalen Hurts,
Absolutely.
Josh Allen,
Absolutely.
Lamar Jackson.
Maybe. Lamar's been up and down.
Maybe he's definitely a good. I respect that one because Lamar also has been up and down. Dak Prescott,
This year for sure.
most definitely. Let's get a little hectic here. Tua Tagovailoa.
Tua has the huge games, but Tua also has games where he disappoints too.
He does. Then CJ Stroud, last name.
Oh. This year, probably CJ Stroud for fantasy.
And CJ Stroud, who just missed his top 10, also was number 13 this week. And he could have been at a way better performance if he just kind of just kept that same energy from the first half. But yeah, his floor is so safe. It's insane that he's a rookie. It really is crazy.
Going on, though, we have a few more quarterback duds here. Justin Herbert, QB 22 on the week, 212 yards, 0 touchdowns, 6-0 game. I honestly barely even watched this game. It was worth nobody's time. But if you go and look at these last 3 weeks for the New England Patriots, they lost 10-6 to the Colts, 10-7 to the Giants, and 6-0 to the Patriots. They make the Jets offense look like they have Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this offense is terrible, whether it's Mac Jones, whether it's Bailey Zappi. I don't even know if Malik Cunningham got into this game, but this is a new low for NFL offenses in 2023. Losing 3 games in a row. I love it. I love every second of it. It's amazing. And we do play week 18. And I know week 18 will probably beat them. And because of that, they'll get the number 2 overall pick instead of number 3 or 4 and get a quarterback. But the Patriots is broken right now. A few other guys. Kyler Murray was QB 50 on the week, so not bad, but only 11 fantasy points. The top guys really fell off around like 11 or 12 this week. Kyler completed just 13 passes, less than 200 total yards and a touchdown. Has a bye week next week, then San Francisco. Week 16 and 17 is Chicago and Philly, so it looks good, but it's at Chicago and at Philly. Philly's played, I think, 3 or 4 rain games in a row, and we know Chicago, the weather can be crazy too. So you're still starting Kyler Murray, but just be cautious because take count of that weather. There could be snow, some rain, sleet, winds, and that could have a big impact on the game. And a couple guys who didn't disappoint, but just wanted to bring up, we saw Kenny Pickett and Derek Carr both get hurt. Kenny Pickett already reported is going to be out multiple weeks. We wanted to see what he would look week 2 without Matt Canada going up against a beatable defense. It also got delayed due to weather in that game, so kind of threw some stuff off. Derek Carr is also being evaluated for concussion. Also seemed like he hurt his shoulder or wrist or arm or something too, but for now we just know concussion. Couple other names, Will Levis once again struggled, and Baker Mayfield had a big play to Mike Evans, like a 70-ish yard touchdown. But outside of that, struggled. And Carolina's defense, we're going to give them crap all season long for how bad their offense has been, but we've seen them slow down Dak Prescott, slow down Baker Mayfield today. Their defense is real. Going up, at least for fantasy quarterbacks, we could nitpick here and there, but going up against fantasy quarterbacks, they have been damn near lights out all season long. So Baker was also on the dud list.
I'm with you. Listen, I spoke about it when we were having our conversation with starts and sits. Godwin was able to get into the end zone, but it wasn't because of a pass. It was an end around that he ended up taking to the crib. Outside of that, really didn't have that much production. Mike Evans is awesome, and I'm sure we're going to talk about him a little bit later, but that dude is something special and has a one-way ticket to Canton, no doubt about it. Now let's move on to our RB studs of Week 13. Running back 1, Alvin Kamara. This is clockwork. This is just what he does. 6 catches for 58 yards, but 2 touchdowns on the ground. That's shocking because you know he's been doing a lot of his work through the air, but when it gets to that goal line, you know Alvin Kamara can get a job done. For a second, I thought the Lions were going to blow this one. I swear to you, Joel, I thought that
I tweeted out for the reverse jinx. I tweeted out the reverse jinx because I knew it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Streets needed that. Running back 2 on the week, Devon Achane, 25 fantasy points, gets into the end zone twice, 73 yards on 17 attempts, 3 catches for 30 yards. He's back. I mean, Devon, when he was healthy, 51 points, 27 points, 21 points, misses 4 straight weeks, comes back against Las Vegas, gets injured, misses this game versus the Jets, but in a full workload again. We're talking about him in the top 3 conversation once more. He's too versatile. He's too fast. He fits this Miami offense perfectly. I mean, are we talking about, let's talk dynasty for a second.
Dynasty. I've seen some hot takes from HN. I've seen people rank HN top 3 fantasy running back. Like it's
wow. I was about to ask you, is he top 10? I was going to ask
people
is he top
seen
10?
Bijan and HN. Like I've seen Bijan's basically one across everyone's board, but I've seen him above Gibbs. I've seen him above JT, Brees, CMC. Go down the names. Like the real thing is that running backs, especially when we're talking about dynasty, it's so like it changes so quick. Right? Like 1 year you could be a top 10 guy. Like I just think like a few years ago, that 2020 class, after that J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, Cam Akers, after their rookie year, all 3 of those guys were undisputed top 12 running backs in fantasy football. And now we look at them today. J.K. Dobbins basically hasn't played football in like 2 years, right? Not consistently. Antonio Gibson's a backup now to Brian Robinson. Cam Akers is on his second torn Achilles. So when you have this kind of opportunity where you're playing at such a high level, you're a rookie or second-year player on an explosive offense, it's probably fair to have him in the top 10. Top 5, I'm not ready to do that yet just because I need to see more than like 4 games. You know what I mean? You see the explosiveness, you see the game-breaking ability on every single touch, but I need a little more sample size in this. I would still take Bijan over him. I'm still taking Gibbs, still taking Jonathan Taylor. Breece Hall has struggled mightily recent.
He needs to slow down before I take someone over CMC. I need to see him slow down before I take someone who also has missed time in his own right, before I take him over CMC, who has nothing less than double digits this season in every single game. This is the best. I don't think people understand that when he's on the field, we're talking about the best skill position fantasy football player ever. Like Adrian Peterson was at a peak where I understand that very few thought that anybody else could reach. LaDainian Thompson also, for those that were playing back in the day. He can do it in the run. He could do it in the pass, and nobody does it at his level. Nobody. You could say that he is a top 3 rusher in the league. He is top 1 catching the football. There's no one that gets into the end zone as efficiently as he does either. He is one of one. So for me, I have difficulty leaning someone over CMC, especially who's missed time in Devon. But I respect and acknowledge that when he's on the field, he is one of the premier running backs. But I had to bring up this conversation because I know when we have our offseason conversations and we're doing our own mock drafts, I'm interested to see how high Devon goes because we know how high-powered this offense is. We know how perfect he fits in this offense. And a name that rings in my mind, how you mentioned Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, Javonte Williams, who when we were doing a lot of redrafts for Dynasty, this guy was going in the late first, early second round because that's how valuable running backs are. And you see the explosiveness with Devon. So it'll be interesting to see where his projection is end of the season and, of course, prior to next year. But moving on, running back 3, Derrick Henry kicks back into prime form, 21 touches, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was and looked like the Derrick Henry that we know and love and respect and acknowledge as one of the best we've seen. He looked back in form. Running back 4, James Conner, he gets into the end zone twice, rushed for over 100. He really was the one that put this game to bed for Arizona over the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers could not do anything. You're 100% right. Revenge game, most definitely. He made them eat it up. He was fantastic. Your sit of the week, unfortunately, my brother, Chuba Hubbard, 25 touches, 104 yards, 2 touchdowns. I'll be there with you. I did not see this one coming. Top 5 against the Buccaneers. They could not stop this man. He had himself a ball game. Does it allow you to change your thought process on Chuba ultimately, or are you still feeling as if he is a RB high? I guess you have to respect him, high-end RB2, or is he a flex?
It's tough because he's getting the workload, and that's all you could really ask for, right? This game, 25 carries, 14 carries the week before that, 10 carries the week before that. After the bye, he also had back to games of 15, 16 carries, so he's getting the work. And now he's off back-to-back weeks of RB11, now RB5, has New Orleans and Atlanta, who are, again, two tough rush defenses he's going to go up against. But Tampa Bay is damn near one of the hardest of them all. And the fact that he was able to get in the end zone 2 times, average over 4 yards per carry, I still don't fully believe the talent. I don't know what it is. Like, I see him. I don't think he's this like amazing running back who's out there either outrunning people, running through people, making them miss. But if you're going to get 20 touches, I mean, you have to be rostered. I still think he's a flex play over an RB2 because the offense is just so bad. And it's not like he really gets a ton of the receiving work either. So you need him to produce on the ground. You probably need him to score a touchdown. But right now, he should undoubtedly be rostered.
All right. Number 6, CMC. Every single week he'll be in this section of the show. Isaiah Pacheco. He's been heating up. 18 carries, 110 yards. Gets into the end zone. Has 3 catches for 13 yards. Got ejected in this game for throwing a punch. Yeah. That was pretty interesting to see. But he was just upset that he got pancaked, unfortunately. But he's been balling out of control. This is definitely one of the safer running backs in fantasy football right now. Number 8, Kyron Williams. I mean, 2 weeks back into the top 10. We're talking about a top 7 running back rest of the season. Honestly, you could probably have discussions that he's higher than that. The workload that he's getting, he goes and has 21 carries in this game. There's very few running backs I trust more than Kyron right now. Rachaad White, again, one of the bigger surprises on the season. 20 carries, 84 yards, had an opportunity to rush for over 100 back-to-back weeks, but knew the game was out of reach with his big run at the very end. He just kind of slows up and goes down in bounds, but also gets into the end zone. Rashad's been I think in fantasy right now, he is a top 6 running back in the grand scheme of things. That is pretty crazy to me, especially with the way that I came to the season with the idea of their running back situation, with the idea their run blocking line was terrible last year. It's still not that good this year, but in the passing game, that's where we've known that he can make an impact. We've seen him consistently live in that realm of just being a dominant receiving back. Baker Mayfield knows he's his safety blanket. He hasn't had less than 3 receptions for what it seems like all season long. He's one of the safer running backs as well. And rounding out that top 10, Tony Pollard. He's been back in form, and you got to love that where it's playoff time. And maybe those that had Tony Pollard, unfortunately, are not in the playoffs. But if he is on your playoff team right now, he is kicking up at that perfect time, because last 3 weeks we're talking about a top 10 running back.
Finally find the end zone for Tony Pollard. It was a drought. It was like a 10-week drought of him getting to the end zone, but being able to get these last couple weeks. Moving on to the RB duds, there's some big names here. First up, DeAndre Swift, RB 34 on the week. It was an ugly game all around, and Swift struggled to find really any running lanes in this game. 6 carries for 13 yards. Saw 6 targets, but only turned that into 7 receiving yards. Has Dallas up next, but then Seattle, Giants, and Cardinals in the fantasy playoffs. So we know how great this rushing offense is. This is a game you probably just have to throw out, because even though Dallas is a tough opponent, you're still starting him. And then those last 3 weeks, Seattle, Giants, and Cardinals, he should be able to eat up those matchups. Austin Eckler, once again, reaches the RB dud section. RB 31 this week, 14 carries for 18 yards, 2 catches for 9 yards through the air. Since coming back from the ankle injury in week 6, he had 4 games within the top 6 where it's like, this is Austin Eckler. He's getting touchdowns, receiving work, but he also has 5 weeks of RB 25 or worse. And he's been inefficient basically all season. Week 1, pre-injury, he averaged, I think, 7 yards a carry. And he had a game against Green Bay where he only got 10 carries, but he was able to be pretty efficient, averaging 5 or 6 yards. Outside of that, he doesn't have another game over 3.6 yards per carry. And, you see that run he had a couple of weeks ago against the Lions where he just does not look like Austin Eckler, where he's running 12 miles an hour and offensive linemen are going faster than him. So whether it's the injuries, the offensive line, he's really not getting as much passing work. He's the last 3 games, 6 receiving yards, 32 receiving yards, 9 receiving yards. He's not scoring touchdowns. So when he's not getting the receiving work or the touchdowns, this is probably what you're going to get from Austin Eckler, because, he's a solid running back, but for fantasy, for him to be the running back we know and love, he has to get into the end zone and he has to get some looks in the passing game. Moving on to Jahmyr Gibbs, RB 27 on the week, 8 carries for 60 yards and -5 receiving yards. Last 2 weeks for Gibbs has been RB 24 and 27. Don't have a snap percentage this game, right? Last week was 71% with David Montgomery. I'd be shocked if this week he had more snaps. David Montgomery had 18 carries, 56 yards, and a touchdown. As I just mentioned, Jahmyr Gibbs had 9 total opportunities in this game. So this was a week where David Montgomery was the lead back. I don't know if that's because they went up so early and they kind of went to maybe some chew clock mode, some 4-minute offense. But then the Saints got back into the game, and we didn't really see the Lions incorporate Gibbs as much in the passing game. Laporta had a huge game. We saw Jameson Williams get a reverse touchdown. Amon-Ra, of course, doing his thing. So there's a lot of parts going on that were able to produce, but Jahmyr Gibbs was not one of them. Jalen Warren and Najee Harris both disappointed. It's a really bad Cardinals rush defense. It was also a bad weather game, as I previously mentioned. You also have Kenny Pickett go down. But I want to know, because these last 2 weeks, Najee Harris has outperformed Jalen Warren after we heard Jalen Warren's going to be the starting running back. So I ask you this question once again. Who would you rather have rest of season, Najee Harris or Jalen Warren?
I hate this question. I hate it a lot because it's constantly flip-flopping back and forth. But now with Canada gone, the last 2 weeks, it seems as if Najee Harris is the guy, but it's kind of messed up because we understand and still believe that Jalen Warren just has a little bit more explosiveness to him. I'm still going to lean Warren. I feel a lot better about Najee than I did a couple of weeks ago. Now that Matt Canada is no longer in town. However, I still believe in the talent of a Jalen Warren, even though the last 2 weeks hasn't been on par with what he's shown us the last 2 weeks before that. However, he's going to get back to his, and I think that when they get a little bit more comfortable, when Kenny Pickett is back on the field for them, because it's very evident. This offense, whether you like Kenny Pickett or not, it is better with Kenny Pickett than Mitch Trubisky. That is very easy to see. But it also impacts the run game because you're selling out on the run, because Najee and Jalen have been the bright spot of this offense. I'll say the more consistent spot of this offense. And when he goes down and you sell out on Najee and Jalen, then it becomes tough sledding for them. But I'll lean Jalen Warren.
A couple of other ones that struggled today. Zach Moss, who was my start of the week, RB24, 19 carries, which is great, only 51 yards. It was pissing me off because every time they would get into the red zone, within the 10, within the 5, they would line up in shotgun and give Zach Moss the ball. They did it time after time after time. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm, like reinventing the wheel here, but just get under shotgun and give him the damn ball. They weren't able to do that. He wasn't able to find the end zone, finish this RB24 of the week. Devin Singletary, RB30 this week. He had 9 touches to Dameon Pierce's 15. We might be seeing a shift back to Dameon Pierce. The good news, though, is Singletary, if you are a Singletary manager, was more efficient, 4.5 yards per carry. Dameon Pierce still struggled, 2.7, but Pierce did get that touchdown. And as I mentioned, got 6 more touches than Devin Singletary. He's still worth rostering, but if he has another week like this, or we see the snaps continue to go in Dameon Pierce's favor, we'll probably have to make some adjustments. Couple injuries. Brian Robinson was on his way to a pretty big game, 7 carries for 53 yards, but missed the entirety of the second half. If he's out for multiple games, Antonio Gibson gets a pretty substantial boost in my opinion. He's already the receiving game back. And of course, he'll get more rushing opportunities. And then Ramondre Stevenson, who had an ankle injury earlier in this game, already reported that he's going to miss multiple weeks. Zeke Elliott is really the only other running back on that roster. They have Ty Montgomery, but he got 1 carry, I want to say, when Ramondre went out. Zeke was 17 carries, 52 yards, also had 4 receptions for 40 yards, has Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Denver, and Buffalo to finish out the year. So Zeke's probably someone we're going to talk about in the waiver spot. We know Ramondre is going to miss at least 1 week, probably going to be more. He's someone that's going to get workload, but it's going to be a really bad offense. And Thursday Night Football this week is going to be Patriots versus Steelers. I can't think of a worse matchup than Bailey Zappi versus Mitch Trubisky. So that might be a game where you pick up Zeke, maybe try to do a cute $1-2 bid and hold them for the future. But these upcoming couple of weeks with the Steelers is going to be a low-scoring game. The Chiefs, whose defense has been so good, you're probably looking at that Denver game 3 weeks from now as the only one you're excited to start them. And that's even tempering expectations because how bad this offense is.
Kind of sucks because Ramondre looked so good early on. Had a big runs, quick 40 yards. And then he goes down with that ankle injury. It looked like he couldn't even put weight on it at all. So multiple weeks does not surprise me. Prayers to my guy Ramondre. Moving on to the wide receiver section of the studs and duds. Studs coming up first. Wide receiver 1 on the week, DK Metcalf. We had our conversation about him earlier on in the week. He goes and has 3 touchdowns, amazing performance, the breakout performance of his season, no doubt. Deebo Samuel finishes as your wide receiver 2, gets into the end zone 3 times himself. A lot of yards after the catch with Deebo. That's why his day kind of stands out a little bit more to me. 116 yards on 4 catches, uber efficient, had the rushing touchdown himself too. It's looking like Deebo Samuel and that Niners offense, they're back. And Deebo looks great. He looks the healthiest that he's looked in some time. And when he's on that football field, his talents, it's undeniable. You know, you were talking about one of the premier wide receivers. Wide receiver 3, this one hurts a little bit. Nico Collins goes for 191 yards on 9 catches, gets into the end zone. This one's tough because we could not stop him if our life depended on it.
It was insane.
Almost 200 yards. 200. And our pass defense, excuse me, look, I'm getting crazy. I drop an AirPod. He goes for almost 200 yards when we have Pat Surtain, when Jaquan McMillan's been balling the way that he has, Fabian Moreau in his own right. It's just something about that pass offense right now that you just have to acknowledge and respect for Houston. They're playing at a high level, and they're doing this with a rookie quarterback. Credit to them and credit to Nico, who's been one of the –
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I have a question about Nico Collins because I've seen a couple nasty things on my timeline. Okay, number 1, Tank Dell done for the season. As we said, prayers up. He gets an obvious boost in redraft, right? 9 for 190 against, like you mentioned, Pat Surtain and a Denver defense that's been playing really good football over this last month, 5 weeks of the season. I've seen some people on my timeline say that in dynasty leagues, you should be looking to sell high on Nico Collins. They think that Tank Dell is going to be that dude. They're going to have a ton of cap space. They don't really have draft picks, so they trade their number 1 to move up for Will Anderson. I saw that, and I'm like, I think we're thinking too hard about this. Let's not. We see a year 3 breakout, which we've seen historically from wide receivers. He's paired to probably the best young quarterback in the NFL, and he's on an offense that loves to throw the ball. We're going to see CJ Stroud maybe break the record for passing yards as a rookie. I'm not under the impression this should be a sell high opportunity for Nico Collins. You don't go out there and just put up 190 yards. You have to be super talented to put up 190 yards in the NFL.
Maybe there's a list of people that have been average that have put up almost 200-yard games. I know Noah Brown had himself a ball game. He goes and gets a gooser today. But 800 yards on the season, that might be a little bit more after today's performance as well. 5 touchdowns, that could be one more as well. I'm just going based off sleeper statistics. So we're talking about a near 1,000-yard receiver in year 3 with one of the premier young quarterbacks in the game. You're right, Joel. Anyone saying sell high, you're thinking too hard. I would try my hardest to hold on to a young guy in a situation that is this beautiful. Sell high. Tank Dell can be great, and Nico can thrive. We've seen that happen on multiple occasions this season. So last week when Tank Dell goes ahead and finds the end zone as well, we see Nico Collins break for over 100 yards. So it's not like the two of them can't coexist in the same offense. When you have CJ Stroud, who spreads the wealth as much as he does, I can't anticipate that Nico is going to continue his dominance. So no, trade high is insane to me. Respect the young king. Number 4, CeeDee Lamb, clockwork every single time. Tyreek Hill, same conversation. We could be talking about him as having the greatest wide receiver season we've ever seen. Yep. And Cooper Kupp just had that, in my opinion, and he's on pace to shatter that. Number 6, Mike Evans. Now, let's give him his flowers. He goes for over 100 yards, 162 receiving, and a touchdown, 7 receptions on 12 targets, 1,000 receiving yards, 10 straight seasons. The only player to do it from the year 1 to year 10. He only trails Jerry Rice in terms of 1,000-yard receiving seasons. Jerry Rice with 14, him with 10, tied with Randy Moss. He's first ballot Hall of Fame. I mean, you don't do things like this and not become a first ballot Hall of Famer. He did it with Jameis. He did it with Tom. And now he's doing it with Baker Mayfield. He's gotten the cream of the crop in Tom, where he was able to reach the mountaintop and win a Super Bowl, be one of the impact players on that team as well. And now with Tom not being on the team, with Baker Mayfield, who in his own right's having himself a solid ball game, a solid season, I should say, excuse me. Mm-hmm. He goes and is a 1,000-yard receiver once again. He's a truly special guy, and we got to give him his love while we have him in our game. Christian Watson, wide receiver 7 on the week. He goes down with a hamstring, but before that was balling out, 7 catches, 71 yards, 2 touchdowns. Had a fire-ass catch to put them up ahead, where Jordan kind of just stays poised in the pocket, lets a slinger go, and he goes and high points the ball very well, gets into the end zone. My start of the week, Michael Pittman, he goes 11 catches, 16 on 16 targets, 105 yards and 1 touchdown. The touchdown that goes and wins the Indianapolis Colts the ball game. I told y'all about Michael Pittman. He's going to be one of the safest wide receivers in fantasy. And he's been doing it week in, week out since week 6, nothing less than double-digit fantasy points every single matchup. He's been awesome this season. Smitty finding his footing with Dallas Goedert out. He's been dominating. He goes 9 catches on 11 targets, goes for 96 yards and a touchdown. These last 3 weeks, 96 yards against San Francisco, 106 yards versus Buffalo, 99 yards versus Kansas City. And it really stems back to that game versus Washington where he just missed 100 yards again with 99. It's seeming as if he's been back into the conversations that we were anticipating. We know the talent of Smitty. It was just that little lull where there were so many mouths to feed on this offense. But with Goddard out, you anticipated that Smitty would get his. And finishing out this top 10, back like he never left, Puka Nacua, 105 yards, a touchdown. A lot of that did come on that 70,
touchdown
that 70 yard.
He
did look fast. That was definitely exciting to see. And I was concerned because going up against this Brown secondary where we know Ward was not playing, I was definitely going to respect Cleveland. But, hey, the Rams went out there and punched them in the mouth. This is back-to-back weeks where we've seen their defense look normal. And Puka Nacua did get injured in this game, had a rib injury, did come back, which was huge. But we saw plenty of fantasy-relevant guys on the opposite side with a Kyron Williams, honestly, Demarcus Robinson had himself a solid ball game. Cooper gets into the end zone, and Puka Nacua, who rounds out our top 10.
Yeah, that injury scare, because I didn't see it live. I saw it on Twitter, and I just see that clip of him holding his arm to his chest, not able to move it. And of course, I'm thinking the worst. I'm like, we can't have Puka go down after he has this crazy game. He had a couple like end arounds too. But thankfully, he was able to return and had a big game. But moving on to the wide receiver duds, a couple big names that probably not busts, but disappointing. Jalen Waddle, 5 for 50 in a game where the Dolphins offense goes crazy. He had a pretty bad drop in this game too. Just hasn't been the year for Jalen Waddle, whether it's injuries, Tyreek Hill, putting up record numbers. He just hasn't been able to consistently find his footing for fantasy football. And Keenan Allen, 5 for 58. An ugly game on offense. Keenan's been sensational all season long. I think he just chopped this up to a 6-point game in the rain on the road. But moving on to some actual duds. Garrett Wilson, 3 receptions for 50 yards. I was watching this Jets game. I had the quad box just because I feel obligated to. There were so many plays he was wide open, man. And the quarterbacks just can't get him the ball. We know what Garrett Wilson is at this point. The talent is
Joe Flacco?
Borderline top 10. Miss Joe Flacco. Trevor Siemian, will he play? Who the hell knows? Doesn't really matter. Chris Godwin, 0 receptions, but did have that 1 rush for 19 yards and a touchdown. Overall,
played me. I was almost spot on with that sit of the week.
Yeah, the 1 rush is really some nonsense, honestly. Adam Thielen, 4 receptions for 25 yards. So since the bye in week 7, he hasn't finished higher than wide receiver 21. His next 3 weeks are going to be at the Saints, versus Atlanta, versus Green Bay. All pretty tough matchups for opposing wide receivers. To me, Thielen's a flex play. You know he's going to get the targets. He's going to get the most targets on this team. But that first month, 2 months of the season where he was a top 7 receiver are probably behind him. Jerry Jeudy, 3 receptions for 61 yards. Has Detroit and the Chargers the next 2 weeks, which is enticing. But overall, this really hasn't been good for fantasy football.
This one's some bullshit. This one's some bullshit because he was open multiple times this game. He had opportunities to be fantasy relevant. He's just not getting the ball. I just want to say that to all the Jerry Jeudy haters because I know the truth, unfortunately. Jerry Jeudy is going to leave us in the offseason when he becomes a free agent. He's going to go to another team. God forbid I say he goes to Kansas City,
That's the
and
first
he's going to make my life a living nightmare because I love this man, and I know that he's more talented than what is being put forward. And today was a perfect example of situations where he's open. He just needs to get the ball, and he isn't.
Yeah, he has yet to finish as a top 20 wide receiver all season long. So someone you either want on your bench or if you're in desperation, you have to cut him. I don't think that's crazy either. Josh Downs, 3 receptions for 14 yards. It's been a while since we've seen a Josh Downs game. Week 8, he goes 7 for 72. He did have a couple injuries. I don't remember which week, but week 9 plays 20% of snaps. Week 10 plays 25% of snaps. Last week, gets 13 targets, but turns it into just 43 yards. This week, a wide receiver 46 finish. I just don't think you could trust him. Gardner Minshew showed early on that he was targeting him, but we've seen Michael Pittman be the most consistent, and now we've seen Alec Pierce over the last couple of weeks get more involved in this offense. Drake London, 1 reception for 8 yards. Tampa Bay next week, just playing the Jets. It's going to be a tough matchup. Tampa Bay next week should be better. And really the only injury we had for wide receivers was Amari Cooper. He got concussed in the second quarter, had 34 yards in that second quarter. He was on his way to having probably a decent game. We saw Joe Flacco at least show the ability to be manageable for fantasy football. Sure. Elijah Moore had a great game. You know how much he loves Elijah Moore from his time with the Jets. But yeah, Amari Cooper with concussions. We've seen a couple guys, Chris Olave this past week was able to do it, but really him and Brock Purdy are the only ones that stick out. So there's a decent chance that he'll miss next week's game.
Moving on to the last part of the studs, we're going to talk about the tight end. Sam Laporta back like he never left. Tight end number crazy. 140 yards on 9 catches, gets into the end zone. He was dominant today, 29 fantasy points. Sam Laporta, if we're talking about dynasty, man, there might be, I don't know if there's 3 tight ends I want over Sam Laporta right now.
You want him over Kincaid?
Having Josh Allen definitely boosts Kincaid, but Laporta has done it all season long. It's not like Kincaid has been bad all season, but we're really starting to see him cook up as of late. But Laporta just seems like he has just since day one fit in as this number 2 option on this Lions team. I'll respect Josh Allen. I think I lean Kincaid there, but that really is it's the when it comes to the vets, Hawkinson, I guess you have Andrews, to say Travis
Kelce.
Hawkinson. Yeah, to be honest with you, it's seeming as if Kelce, he is 34 years old. He has been amazing. How many more years can we anticipate this happen? I'll respect Hawkinson. He's been awesome. But again, for the longevity and for how much longer I think Laporta has in front of him and how close it's been in production, I'll go Laporta. McBride, who is the number 2 tight end on the week, needs to be in this conversation because since Zach Ertz went down, there has been no one targeted more than McBride, and the catches that he has, 8 receptions. Let's just look at the game log real quick. He has 9 targets today, 8 catches. 9 targets last week, 7 catches. 7 targets the week before that, 5. 9 targets the week before that against Atlanta, 8 catches. Cleveland, that's when they've been on their amazing run. He had 5 targets, 3 catches. But then against Baltimore, 14 targets, 10 catches, and that was Kyler's first game back. I don't think that was his first game back. I think Kyler's first game back was I'm blanking off the top of my head. Was it Atlanta? It might have been. Yes, that is what Atlanta. It was, Atlanta. And that's when we saw Trey have himself a great game. But McBride's definitely in this conversation. You see just how physically imposing he is. He has great speed to him. He has excellent hands. Obviously, like I mentioned, the physicality that he provides. Again, the tight end position, I think it's getting a little bit better than what people want to give credit to. And another guy here who's young, Jake Ferguson, tight end 3, who we spoke about on Thursday. He had himself a great game, 6 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. Kind of embarrassed Jamal Adams to the point where Connor Hughes calls him out. And then Jamal Adams has the audacity to go and call out Connor Hughes and use a picture of him and his wife. To me, that didn't sit right with me. I think you have to be a lot more professional than that. And calling out someone who has nothing to do with your problem with Connor Hughes, who has nothing to do with anything, just, I don't know. That definitely was not professional of Jamal Adams and not a good look by any means. Harrison Bryant, tight end for the Cleveland Browns. He goes and gets himself into this conversation. 5 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown. But really, outside of that, Taysom Hill was the last guy we can acknowledge here. He goes 13 carries, 59 yards. He had himself a touchdown on 2 catches for 15 as well. Taysom Hill, one of the funner guys in fantasy football where he can just do just about anything. He had 2 passing attempts this game also, didn't complete any of them. But Kelce, in case you guys are wondering, yeah, he is a top 10 guy. He just finishes outside that top 5 with 4 catches on 81 yards. Just needed that touchdown to get into that top 5. But an okay week. I mean, we only saw 8 tight ends score double digits, and the last one was, let me not butcher his first name, Kylan Granson for Indianapolis. where he had 3 catches for 72 yards. Tight end position wasn't that great this week, ironically.
And with Derek Carr being out, Taysom Hill could probably enter a bigger role. I feel like when Carr
True.
has missed time in the past, you've seen especially in the red zone him get work. So yeah, if someone dropped him or whatever it might be, maybe he's on your bench still. He's probably someone who's going to be startable for these next couple of weeks. I only have 2 tight end duds that are probably worth mentioning. Pat Freiermuth came back down to earth. Career game last week. This game, 29 receiving yards. You mentioned it. This offense with Mitch Trubisky, it's going to get really ugly, probably for everyone involved outside of the running backs who are still going to be startable. And the other one's going to be David Njoku. 4 of the previous 5 weeks, he was a top 7 tight ends. But his first game with Joe Flacco, 2 receptions for 17 yards, still got 6 targets. But we did see Elijah Moore have a big game. And even with Amari Cooper going down to injury, it was a bit surprising Njoku wasn't as involved. They were in this game. This was a 1-touchdown game really throughout the entirety of it. But he was disappointing this week.
And now we're going to move on to the waiver wire section of our show. Again, before we get into that, if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Not too many guys that I'm overly infatuated this week. You mentioned Ezekiel Elliott. That's definitely one that we could be considering. But we'll just go position by position. At the quarterback position, are you interested in a Joe Flacco in a 2-quarterback league?
We don't know the status of DTR. Is that correct? It's still up in the air whether he plays.
Correct. It's still
whether he plays
correct.
next week. Who do the Browns play
the
next
status
week?
is up in the air. However, Joe Flacco against the Rams, whose defense not the best, quarterback 11 on the week. What do you think?
They have Jacksonville, Chicago, Houston these next 3 weeks. I mean, 2-quarterback league, you're desperate. Like right now in our league, I have Desmond Ridder on my bench. They play Jacksonville next week because I have Kyler, who's going to be on bye next week. So if you're in that situation where it's like you're in a 2 QB league, you have Kyler or someone else on bye, and you're like, I don't have another choice. Joe Flacco, I guess you could do in a decent matchup.
Wouldn't
but
it
overall,
suck if
I'm not excited for it.
spent the rest of my fab and kind of screwed you out of getting Joe Flacco?
I mean, him or Desmond Ridder, I don't know.
Yeah,
bro.
it's a double-edged sword. It's not great
Yeah.
either way. You mentioned Taysom Hill. I only say that because if you're on Sleeper, you can play him as a quarterback. You can play him as a tight end. I still think that Taysom Hill should not be rostered either which way. Desmond Ridder, you mentioned, I don't know if I'm still taking a flyer on him. Does have Tampa Bay, who hasn't been the best pass defenses like you just mentioned, but then does have Carolina, Indianapolis. I don't know if I'm just staying away from Desmond Ridder. I'm not thinking too much about it. Not too many other quarterbacks that I'm looking at. Does Jameis pique your interest at all because of the Derek Carr injury?
He does because we know Jameis is a gunslinger. I would probably prefer, before I say this, who are they playing next week before I get ahead of myself and disrespect the legend Joe Flacco?
The Saints play Carolina, who we mentioned, who's not good. That's not great. I don't like any matchups going up against their defense. The Giants, the Rams, and Tampa Bay.
I'm under the assumption whoever needs Jameis, I'm hoping at least only needs him for 1 week.
1 week.
Again, if you're in a bye situation in Carolina, they've showed just throughout the season to be really tough against opposing quarterbacks. So I'd probably leave Jameis on the waiver wire.
For running backs, I think we're looking at Ezekiel Elliott the most. We already mentioned that Ramondre Stevenson is going to be out multiple weeks at this point in time. Thinking about how the scarcity of fab is definitely at this point in time of the season. I think Ezekiel Elliott's definitely worth a pickup. Is rostered in 44.5% of leagues. I think he has a role regardless, especially
even with the opponents. Even with the Steelers short Thursday night, it's going to be like 6-3 probably in the Chiefs.
Against Pittsburgh, their rush defense is not that great. Kansas City, not a good matchup. But then at Denver, who our rush defense, if there still is a hole, it's definitely still our rush defense. And then last week in terms of fantasy playoffs, it's going to be at Buffalo, who, again, if they're susceptible to something, it's definitely the run. I think that he's definitely worth a pickup. And at this point, I'm looking at Zeke. With the running back landscape, low end RB2, definitely low, but he could be a flex play, no doubt.
You'd rather have Hubbard next week against the Saints or Zeke against the Steelers?
Oof. Good question. Against the Saints, because the Saints defense definitely has been struggling as of late. I'm gonna go Zeke over him. I just think the Steelers in that matchup, they're going to rely on Zeke so much because why would you put the ball in Bailey Zappi's hands that much? And to get into the goal line, he can get you into the end zone. And obviously, he's being used in the pass game as well, like we saw in this game where he had 4 catches. I think Zeke might be my answer. But hey, he seems to be, you mentioned Chuba Hubbard, where he seems to be a little bit matchup proof at this point in time, these last couple of weeks. But again, I think I'll trust Zeke in that matchup versus Pittsburgh.
Two other
next
names
name I'll
because
mention. That's fine.
sorry, I was going to give you two other names just with Zeke in these because there's two young guys. I may or may not have them on my main team, but two guys that last week we seen a huge spike in snap percentages. Roschon Johnson, who had 74% of snaps, and Keaton Mitchell, who had 46% of snaps before the bye week. He's steadily gone up. Keaton Mitchell's explosive. Roschon has more of that workhorse type of role. Do you prefer either of them above these waiver wire running backs, Hubbard, Zeke?
Keaton Mitchell most definitely is the most intriguing to me because of that offense and understanding that the attention Lamar Jackson draws, it is just intriguing as hell for any running back in that backfield. It just helps that Keaton Mitchell actually has some explosiveness to him. I'll lean Keaton over all of those guys for sure. You mentioned, I'm sorry, who's the first name that you mentioned? Roschon Johnson. That was definitely a great sneaky pickup from you. You were able to get him in our league for $0. But seeing that snap percentage, understanding that we're seeing that offense a little up and down, but with that snap percentage, definitely intriguing. I think I'll still lean Zeke against Pittsburgh there. Just again, I feel as if his floor is still pretty safe. He's going to get a ton of opportunity. Pittsburgh's rush defense hasn't been that great. I'll still lean him, but then I'll put Roschon. I'll put Chuba, and then I'll put Roschon last, just because Chuba had himself a great ball game, and I don't want to disrespect him.
That's valid.
All right, let's last name. I guess AJ Dillon, but he's rostered in a ton of leagues. But he's on waiver wires in our league, so that's why I gave that name out. Alec Pierce, he was almost a top 10 wide receiver this week. Was wide receiver 11, goes for over 100 yards, but only on 3 catches. Did get into the end zone, had that play where he just put his team in red zone position, the play right before Michael Pittman scores the game-winning touchdown. Is he piquing your interest at all?
It's hard to remember, but last year, Alec Pierce had so much hype, right? He was a second, third round pick, I want to say.
Yep.
I know Joel was super high on him. And of course, the Colts season last year, kind of too high. The Colts season last year went to shit with Matt Ryan and Jeff Saturday and the mess they had there. But Alec Pierce is showing, we know he has the talent. Probably not someone that in a 10-man league, I don't know if you have 5-6 roster spots on the bench, bench pieces, that is, if he's someone I'm looking to pick up, but a 12-man league where you need a couple, extra depth pieces, that's someone I'm willing to, put a waiver claim on.
All right. Alec Pierce, of the 3, you tell me which one you'd rather, because these are all waiver wire options. Alec Pierce, Demarcus Robinson, Juwan Jennings.
I'd probably lean Alec Pierce there.
Okay. Demarcus Robinson had himself. Go ahead.
Yeah, just I would say Juwan Jennings, there's just so many mouths to feed there where it's
Agreed.
I know it's going to be Debo and Ayuk and all these guys. Alec Pierce, we love Josh Downs. He's shown some potential, but these last couple of weeks, Alec Pierce is shown to be the wide receiver 2 on this team, and Gardner Minshew is more than serviceable for fantasy.
So another name I'll mention, the last one I'll mention on wide receiver is going to be Elijah Moore. Now, you spoke about it. Joe Flacco and him have a connection dating back to his time over there in New York. In my opinion, I think Joe Flacco should remain the Cleveland Browns quarterback for the rest of the season. I don't anticipate that this defense struggle as much as it did going forward, although didn't see Myles Garrett look at 100%, not by any means, really didn't have an impact on this game almost at all. And then Denzel Ward also is missing time, which is obviously, you're talking about their 2 best defensive players not being on the field. It's going to impact this team. But I think with Joe Flacco, in my opinion, if they do decide to move on, which in my opinion they should, is Elijah Moore one of those guys that you become higher on, where he had 4 catches today, 83 yards.
I was just going to say, how many targets did he have? He had 12 targets. Yep. Joe Flacco loves Elijah Moore, right? You mentioned that you go back to his rookie year with the Jets, or even last year with the Jets. He was able to put up numbers with Joe Flacco. But to be fair, Elijah Moore was putting up numbers with everyone not named Zach Wilson. I think as long as Joe Flacco is the quarterback there, Elijah Moore is someone that should be picked up. He had a lot of hype going into the season when he got traded because the Browns gave a second-round pick for him. I know he probably hasn't put up second-round pick type of numbers, but they invested a pretty high draft capital into this guy, so they want to use him. Of course, DTR has really not shown up to this point to be great for real life or great for fantasy for the receivers on this team. But if Joe Flacco is going to be there, Elijah Moore is someone you should look to pick up.
And the last part, we'll talk about defenses for next week because there's one defense in particular that you all should be going after. That's the Houston Texans defense going up against the New York Jets. You saw the Falcons ball out against them. Miami, if you were fortunate enough to pick them a couple of weeks, they had the Jets on Black Friday. They have them again in week 15. So if you have Miami, obviously you're in heaven. But any team going up against the New York Jets is definitely a team that is worth targeting. Indianapolis Colts going up against Cincinnati. I think that is also dependent on how Cincinnati looks going up against the Jaguars tomorrow night. But with the way that they looked against the Steelers 2 weeks ago, it's definitely one that I'm keeping in the back of my mind. And honestly, other than that, there's not too many other defenses that I like. Oh, and we'll respect the Saints versus Carolina. If the Saints are available in your leagues, go out and get them because Carolina's offense has been struggling. But Mr. Dells, if you don't have anything else to say, that's going to do it from us over here at the Fantasy Reaction Show, episode 26. To those that have stuck around, we appreciate you. If you haven't already, drop a like on this video. It helps us out a lot. If you aren't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, come on. What are you doing? Subscribe to the channel. Turn on that notification bell so you know when we go live, like nights like tonight. We go live Sundays and Thursdays. We're probably recording the main podcast tomorrow night. So if you guys are around to it into that, we'll most likely be going live then too. We appreciate all the love that you guys have been showing us on the Fantasy Reaction Show. Just know we're always gonna keep the Fantasy Reaction Show alive, even in the off season, in case that was any concern. But that's gonna do it from us over here at the Fantasy Reaction Show. We'll see you guys.